Are you filming? Filming? Oh, that's hot. Hi, Miss Austin. This is, I believe, my fifth video for DIR number 3. I'm basically going to talk about the epilogue and then and I think I'm going to talk about themes in this one because while it's still fresh in my mind, I want to talk about some of the themes that I ran across along the way. But basically in the epilogue, we find a little more in depth about the Daroga and Eric's past. And basically, they have history together, definitely. And in the epilogue, there's even Moncharmin, who was one of the replacement directors for the opera house. They still sort of disprove the existence of the Phantom, and so there's like still critics on the narrators, the sort of all the evidence he's gathered up, and the narrator says that he'll leave the evidence in the archives of the Paris Opera House, and he's talking to the readers and directing them to where he can find them. And I really like that. It's sort of, he's talking to the audience because Paris Opera House is a real place. You can go there, and there is indeed a lake that runs under the Opera House, and I thought I really like this sort of mix of supernatural elements in the book, but also it's a real existing place, and there's definitely a tangible element to it. But basically in the epilogue it talks about how Eric was basically casted away by his parents. He had a very tragic childhood, or he was neglected a lot because of his appearance, and basically ran away, joined a group of gypsies, ended up in a palace, gave advice to the king, basically, became popular in the court, stuff like that, but the king decided he knew too much and decided to execute him. But then the Daroga realized that Eric was sort of plagued by injustice, and I think it evolves over a lot around his appearance and his ingenuity, and so I believe other people are really threatened by him. But the Daroga basically saves his life, and he also becomes banished. But Eric later goes to entertain the Sultan, something like that, which he also ends up having his life threatened by him, and he saying he knew too much in there. And honestly, Eric just can't catch a break. And basically this is all the events leading up to him settling in Paris, to where he decides that he wants to stay in Paris. He sort of wants to lead a semi-ordinary life. Can't really be ordinary if you're hiding in an opera, but he enjoys like illusions. He enjoys tricks, and he likes this persona of being the Phantom of the Opera and hiding from the rest of humanity. There's other things that encompass the epilogue, but that's sort of where I want to cap it. And I do want to talk about, very briefly, because there is next installment / episode is the character talk. Yes. But I didn't really like Eric before he sort of forgave. Well, I didn't feel too strongly about any of the characters, but after Eric sort of let Christine go, I realized sort of how heartbreaking his life is, his tale is, And so the narrator even says in the epilogue that the reader should take pity on Eric. He argues that he's suffered from a lot of injustice, and even when he got in a place to where he could express artistically what he was capable of, people were threatened by him, and like he was, of course, like banished or tried to put to execution, stuff like that. And very last part in the epilogue, the narrator says how he found Eric's body in the underground part, basically like catacombs of the opera, and he said that he looked like just any other human corpse. But the narrator knew that the corpse was Eric because of the ring on his finger, which was the one he gave Christine. And I like this ending only because the narrator notes that how his body looks just like any other human beings. He's not a ghost, he's not a phantom, he's not known as the voice, he's not the angel of music, he's not the master of the traps, he's just as human as any other, and he finally sort of reached this normal state, I guess, in death. And I thought that was awfully peaceful of an ending, and I liked it. I liked the way it sort of left off on that note. But in terms of the book, since I read through all of it, I can see how people sympathize with Eric. At first I didn't, because it was sort of taboo about sympathizing with like a killer or a murderer, but he truly has a very tragic background. But I don't want to talk too much about characters until the next episode. But I do want to just read, go through some of the annotations and read like some of my favorite parts. This was the part where sort of Raoul describes his feelings towards Christine in on page 26 of the Penguin Classics edition. And I really, really like this. And he says, he felt that his poor, pristine heart no longer belonged to him. Since Christine, whom I have known as a little girl, had reappeared, he had tried very hard, out of self-respect and faith, to defend himself against the tender feelings that she inspired in him. And he had sworn to love only the woman that she would make his wife, and naturally marrying a singer was out of the question. Now those tender feelings had given way to pain, sensations, sentiments. His response was at once physical and emotional. His chest hurt as if it had been cut open and his heart removed. Inside, he felt only a terrible hollowness, a genuine emptiness that could only be relieved by his winning the heart of the one he loved. The psychology of love is such that experiences of this kind can be best understood, it seemed, by those to whom love, as the French coup de foudre suggests, that revealed itself with the unexpected abruptness of lightning. I thought that was really nice. And then above that, literally right above that, in yellow, I said, as Christine triumphs, Joseph died. And because that was the performance where she took Carlotta's place. And she basically, before this, she was like a bit of a understudy. She was not very noticeable, and she gave sort of this outstanding performance. And there's these seesaw of whenever Christine triumphs, something bad happens. Or whenever Christine basically performs, because, the Phantom's going to be there to watch his muse, something bad happens, because sort of wherever the Phantom goes, misfortune sort of follows. I like the way that sort of balances, and oh yeah, and also throughout the novel, I really like part of it was sort of the incorporation of the arts and music, and there was also a bit of architecture in there. The way that sort of the rooms were described, the theater was described, was really nice, and I really liked, even though I didn't understand all of it, sort of allusions to operas and musicals. Well, I wouldn't call them musicals. They're not musicals. And other performances and composers and sort of in descriptions of voices, I thought were really, really nice, really descriptive. And even though like you can't hear any of their performances, I thought Gaston Leroux did a really good job with, or this translation was really good in sort of depicting how the emotions that their voice invoked and stuff like that. And even though this isn't like a fantasy, like strictly like supernatural book, there's a lot of supernatural elements with the Phantom in the things he does. And at times I actually question, like, is he allowed to do that? Not like is he allowed, but like how could that be attempted? What are the sort of strings being pulled the whole time? And I like the way that this book sort of makes you think about that. And so moving on to themes, because I did want to talk about that. One of the things I noticed was one of the most prominent ones is beauty versus ugliness. Obviously, Eric is very deformed. He was born deformed. The way his appearance was described, I want to describe his appearance here. Quote, "But imagine, if you can, the mass of the Red Death suddenly coming to life in order to express, through the holes that were his eyes, his nose, and his mouth, the unfettered anger and sovereign fury of a demon, and yet not the slightest gleam for those eye sockets, for, I was to learn later, his burning eyes only shone in the darkest night. Recoiling against the wall, I must have seen the very embodiment of terror, just as he was hideousness incarnate. Then he drew close to me with grinding teeth and no lips, and I drew upon my knees. He unleashed his hatred, hissing random words, disconnected phrases, curses, and ravings. I knew not what." And Christine, who is the female protagonist, she's described through Raoul's eyes, and Raoul is basically infatuated with her. And so the way he describes her is like the pinnacle of beauty, even though she may not be the most beautiful woman. Sort of, she's pure. She's untainted by the sort of ugliness the Phantom is, and that's sort of where the opposites attract notion comes from. And so I think that because Christine is beautiful, because she's normal, because she's whole, the Phantom sort of wants to draw into her beauty, sort of wants to, you naturally get sucked into, if it's something that you don't have, you naturally gravitate towards it. And even though this isn't relevant to this reading, he also reminds me a lot of the creature from Frankenstein, because Frankenstein's creature is also deformed, and it's not something he can help, but he is feared because of it, he's judged because of it, and and sort of misfortune follows him for that reason. And sort of the readers can't help but take pity on Eric's tragic background and the creature's tragic background, and they sort of have this role of being the villain, but they're very easy to sympathize towards, and it's very easy to take pity on these characters. And yeah, that's one of the connections that I drew towards the between Frankenstein and the Phantom. I mean, if you want another one, Elizabeth and I'm getting their names mixed up now. Elizabeth and Christine are also very similar because they're sort of this pinnacle of purity. They, to Victor Frankenstein, to Victor, Elizabeth is this angelic creature who is only goodness, you know. She's loyal to him, she's good, he loves her, and his death is what causes her to, her death is what causes him to sort of grieve the hardest. It's the climax of the story. And Christine, she's Eric's muse. she was the first woman to accept Eric for who he was, even without the mask. Even if when she was initially horrified by him, she still visited him even after, you know, she was repulsed by his appearance. And sort of this intrinsic kindness in the characters really shone through. But another theme is love versus jealousy. And in this story, in Phantom of the Opera, there's a very thin line, like almost invisible, between love and jealousy, because they often come hand in hand. When one is mentioned, the other follows. Because Raoul's character is obviously in love with Christine, once again mentioned. He fell in love with her when they were little. He was ecstatic to see her again a little later in their youth, and then he would go to Christine's. He went to Christine's performances and stuff like that, and he would go to visit her dressing room, even though he was a viscount and she was just a singer at an opera. And so there's this very there's this, I wouldn't say power imbalance, but there's obviously like sort of like, what's it called, Prince Charming and Cinderella vibes to it, very fairy tale like. And like, this is, Phantom of the Opera is sort of like Beauty and the Beast slash Rags to Riches tale, kind of. But yeah, and so whenever Raoul would try to confront Elizabeth, she would push him away. He would feel bitterness towards her, a little bit of anger, because why would she do that? And then she's like, you have a man in your dressing room. You're seeing somebody, and you won't tell me the truth. And he's often sort of coming up with these scenarios that explanations of why Christine is sort of rejecting him, and he's like, oh, she's lying to me, she's manipulative, and she's in a relationship with somebody else, or why won't she tell me why she won't marry me, and stuff like that. And Eric is very similar in that way, is that he only wants her to pay attention to him. He wants her to marry him, he wants her to sort of be his forever, sort of has this claim to her. And that's sort of where the line between those two characters blur, because they both intend to sort of chase Christine, or the ultimate goal is to marry her. And so there's this triangle of sort of villain with a tragic background, or these perfect pinnacle prince that will sweep you off your feet. But that's not really how it goes, because, you know, maybe the villain ends up being half decent for once. But yeah, love and jealousy in this book really go hand in hand. With that, I mean, with that theme. And another prevalent theme definitely is revenge, sort of violent acts in the name of love also. I don't know where it is exactly, I don't know if I even marked it, but basically in Eric's rage, he tells Christine, like, I'm willing to do whatever for you, and it means to kill the Phantom. And Gaston Leroux really draws on sort of these love bordering on obsession, love sort of veiled by jealousy, by infatuation. He does it very well. And yeah, that's it for this video. Oh, this camera is running out of battery. Okay, I have to plug in this camera. Bye.